I'm S.A. Bradley, and welcome to Hellbent for Horror, a podcast devoted to all things related to horror, where I remind you that you used to love horror movies, and you secretly still do. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hellbent for Horror broadcast, coming live to you from downtown San Francisco at the FAN EXPO-SAN FRANCISCO. It is at the Moscone West Convention Center. We are here all weekend, and there's thousands of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror fans that are here. So come join us. Now, today is Black Friday, and that is the perfect day to have a conversation.
Is that why you had me on?
That's why we're having you on. The Dark Scribe himself is coming on. Vincent V. Cava. He is a horror author from Los Angeles, so he says. His books, like Just a Little Terrible.
It is debatable.
It is debatable. Bel Air, right? Bel Air. That's kind of close. Okay.
I was talking about the horror author part.
Well, he does have some books, believe it or not. Just a Little Terrible, Pastel-Colored Dreams and Human-Flavored Nightmares, as well as Creepypasta the Comic and Nightmare Sketchbook. They have a massive online following, folks, and they have been translated into multiple languages. He has an upcoming book series called Midnight Hour. Vince, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah. It's an honor to be jerking the curtain here with you.
That's right.
At SF Fan X.
That's right. Tugging the table liner.
There we go.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of masturbation jokes, I have a feeling.
Because there's such a young audience here we need to see about keeping hip. So I read...
I just want to see an audience.
I would love to see an audience too. Wouldn't it be great? So there's a question that I ask everybody that comes on my show, and it has to do with how they got into this. I call it the first kiss with horror. And that's the thing that you read or the movie that you saw that just completely did something to you that made you want to follow this genre for the rest of your life. Now, not everybody has one. So I usually say you can tell me about a little bit around what it was like or what the first transgressive thing was.
You want to know my horror sexual awakening.
Yeah, your sexual awakening or your horror sexual awakening.
I don't have a horror sexual awakening. Horror's been touching me since I was a little child. I was an only child, actually. And I grew up with first-time parents, and so we would go to Blockbuster or whatever and rent a Disney movie or Cool Runnings, and then we'd get Hellraiser, and I'd watch them both. And so horror's always been a big part of my life, and it's always strange to me when I talk to people who do have that first kiss with horror, just because I honestly can't point to one specific moment in my life where like this is the first time I'm gonna be watching a scary movie or reading a scary book or something like that. No, it was when I was a kid. It was I would get these little horror books from the Scholastic Book Drive written for kids, and I was watching Aliens in theaters, and it's just always been a big part of my life, and I guess I'm appreciative of that. So thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, it may be that there was a very permissive way around your family. Now, I came from
we watched porn together too.
That was good. Yeah, it's a good. No wonder they were first-time parents. It's good to know that they were first-time parents, that they didn't mess up a few times, or like a couple bodies in the backyard. Or something.
I hope they don't.
The first one that made it through that first month, and choke you out. So for me, I was a kid that was in a cult, essentially. I was in a cult that thought the world was going to end in 1975, so everything was repressive in my life. So when I did finally get a taste of something that was illicit, in other words, something that wasn't allowed by my parents, it made a huge dent in my life and, gave me nightmares for at least 3 days. But at the same point, it was a moment where I felt that I could be myself. So it sounds like you had been really inured by the genre itself. What was it that kind of drew you into it? Was it the type of storytelling that was going on? Was it the thrill of being scared? Was it funny to you?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely always found humor in horror. And even now, like I talk to people and I go, what the fuck's wrong with my sense of humor? Because like People talk about some horrible scene where somebody's head gets blown off or something, scanners, right? The head goes, like, I can't help but laugh at that stuff. And even as a kid, like the gore, I just thought it was hilarious. Obviously, when you get into the more psychological, character-driven stuff, if a story really captivates you and draws you in, you get more involved with the characters, and you start paying more attention to the horrors, the psychological horrors that they're going through. You empathize, you do. But there was always just something that was so cool about horror. It was violent, but it played by its own rules, and you could just have fun watching this stuff on TV because it's not real.
Yeah, I think that's what I tend to call horror the punk rock of cinema and literature, because it allows for a lot of DIY stuff. I think most of the people that I know, if I go to like a convention that's a particularly horror convention, every third person is like, yeah, I'm making a movie now. Yeah, I have 2 books that are in distribution.
Yeah.
I've got a band that we do all horror stuff. So there's something where it compels people to be creative in some fashion.
Yeah, I always think it's weird when people say they're not horror people. I'm like, you just haven't found the right horror, because it speaks to everybody. You just might not be into slasher movies.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the things that I find as well when I talk to someone who says that they're not a horror fan. Coming to a convention like this, something that happens all the time at your table. Someone will come over and say, I'm a big horror fan. They'll talk for about 20 minutes. And then someone will come all the way across a crowded room with this look in their face just to tell you how much they hate horror. It's one of those things that it just has this real passionate thing to it. And I think what happens is a lot of people think that the horror movie that they hate, like a slasher, is all that horror is.
Yeah.
And I think that some big fans think that every movie has to be like the one that they like, or it's not really horror. But you touched on something really interesting, that there's a horror movie or a horror type for every kind of person. What is the style that you most are drawn towards?
Definitely horror. In film, it's got to be the horror comedies. American Werewolf in London, CREEPSHOW, it's one of my favorite films.
Return of the Living Dead.
Return of the Living Dead, yeah, but that's really more about Trash's boobs. But there's something about a horror movie that can make you laugh while still scaring you. And that's not to say that every movie does it well. I'm one of those people that, like, I'll draw the line. I'll be like, there's horror comedies and there's comedy horrors.
Yes.
And while as much as I love a good horror comedy, where the horror is it's still contained as something you would see in a horror film. It's still terrifying. It's still scary. It's still gripping. But then it still somehow makes you laugh. That's what I appreciate, as opposed to something that would be like a scary movie.
Right, where they're not really fans of horror. They're not paying respect to the horror side. They're more paying more to the comedy, and the comedy is the foil is horror. Whereas a lot of the horror that I love that has comedy in it, it's situational. Mm-hmm. It's more that the laughter comes naturally, or it's a nod to what's happening in horror, but it's not necessarily making fun of it. So you have, I wanted to talk about your books.
Oh my God, look at all these notes.
Oh, I don't come unprepared, because you know what happens sometimes? You look out here and all of a sudden you just go blank. I have been there. I know we could talk for
I'm way
hours
too
on
lazy
this.
to make notes.
Your first book was Decomposing Head, Frighteningly Funny Tales That Will Rot Your Brain.
Yes.
And S.R. Toombs was also.
Oh my God, yeah.
So the story Gas Station Bathroom. Okay, so anybody has read this, you know what I'm about to talk about, how this is outrageously grotesque. It is hilariously gross in the descriptions of just what's happening inside of a gas station restroom on the side of the road. And what's great is that it has a really interesting punchline end, as well as something, there's one story called The Cannibal that's in there. which is this really
I haven't
nasty,
thought about that fucking story in so long. Holy shit.
It's a nasty story about a cannibal that's
Where did you get this? Where'd you get your hands on this book?
I know, it's like, it's super rare, isn't it?
I
It's
took
like,
it out of print.
yeah, it's out of print. I have my ways. So what's funny is that you have a real rat-a-tat punchline in this. It ends with somebody gurgling.
It says a first-person narrative from about a cannibal that's eating a person, and the person's just like, I have hepatitis C.
And it ends with, oh, well, fuck. That's how the story ends. So it's not easy to do, right? It's not easy for someone to be able to mix horror and comedy. I know they're not the same. Anytime I ever talk to a comedian, they're like, don't you fucking dare. But what do you think is the Venn diagram between the two?
Oh, man, I think they're cousins. I mean, maybe even like if this, we're talking, they could at least get married in Alabama, you know. But there's definitely a crossover between horror and comedy. It's both satire. People talk about comedy as satire and comedy, but horror is satire too. What we do when we write horror is we take a look at the world and we look at things that piss us off or scare us. And then we just crank it up to 11. That's what we do. I mean, one of the Voltaire, you know, the fucking Candide is one of the most famous satires ever written. That shit is horrific. And that's really, that's all it is to me. And that they're so closely linked that I just can't help but be silly in my horror. Because it just comes naturally to me. To me, it's just, I do the same thing that a comedian does or that a comedy writer does, because you don't want me standing up on stage performing, that's for sure. Take a look at today. But I do the same thing. I'm just taking a specific thing that upsets me, or I find it weird or gross, or maybe even it just makes me a little uncomfortable, and I crank it up to 11, and that's a horror story. That's a gas station bathroom. Everybody's had to go in a gas station bathroom at one point in their lives, and heaven forbid it's number 2. So you've been there.
Someone walks in.
This story pretty much writes itself, right? And then somebody walks in, right? Yeah. The story pretty much writes itself. So yeah, I still am like blown away that you got your hands on Decomposing Head. The funny thing about SR TOOMS, I could give you the scoop. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a podcast, but that guy introduced me to the Amazon Smut Illuminati. I don't know if this is getting off topic. I could tell you about Amazon Smut Illuminati later.
Sure.
Yeah. So like when I wrote Decomposing Head with him, I remember that was the book that I was like, I can do this professionally. I got my paycheck and I was like, oh my God, look at that number. It's huge. I can actually make a living doing this. It wasn't that big, but I was like, I can make a living doing this. And I messaged TOOMS and I was like, here, give me like a PayPal or something. I could send you half of the royalties. And he goes, keep it. And I go, what? Why? He's like, oh, I make way more writing smut on Amazon.
Right.
And I go, really? And so he tells me, and he tries to get me into it. There was like 12 people at the time, and they were writing like all of the smut on Amazon. And there was like, they did this brilliant thing where they'd write a book, and then they just changed the pronouns, and then now it's like a gay smut book. And then they changed some character traits, and now and put a different cover on, and now it's like a black smut book. And then they do it again for like BBW and stuff. So like one book would take them, they could mirror it 10, 11, 12 different ways, and they'd publish them under different pen names. Mm-hmm. And they would get like a stock photo of some Russian model and like write some bogus bio. It was great. And there was like 12 dudes. Some of them might have been girls. I don't know. I never actually met them personally. And they were They were writing like all of it, and they screwed up Amazon's algorithm so bad that you'd search, you do like a search for by category or something. Let's just take horror, and it would be like number 1, Stephen King. Number 2, my BBW werewolf gangbang.
Right.
Like would be like the top rated books in Amazon, because they would just be killing it on the Kindle Unlimited and everything. So Amazon actually changed the search algorithm, and also how Kindle Unlimited pays out authors because of all of the smut. They were turning into like a porn platform.
Well, smut does sell. It's so funny. My book is not smut, but it's got a
Could have
double
fooled
entendre.
me.
Yeah, right. I mean, you've read it, but it's a double entendre title: "Screaming for Pleasure: How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy." So I had people on the first day it was coming out, they're searching for it on Amazon, and it's like, well, what comes up if you just put "Screaming for Pleasure"? You get an awful lot of really interesting things. So I was like going, yes, this works for me. It keeps everybody talking.
I wish I was Chuck Tingle.
Yeah, I know. I wrote him down when you were talking about it. It's like, this is like Chuck's world right here.
Yeah. I mean, Chuck Tingle probably was one of those people on the Amazon smut Illuminati.
So when we're talking about stuff like smut, we're talking about certain taboos, we're talking about sacred cows that come in and out of vogue all the time. And I think horror and humor both allow enough distance and enough absurdity for us to be able to really punch holes in some of the sacred cows without getting killed. What's a sacred cow that you want to punch right now?
A sacred cow.
Yeah, like not the actual animal. That's not.
Oh, okay.
What do you want to barbecue?
Well, my next book is called The Beast Beneath the Streets, and actually, I wanna punch all of you and myself too, and I'll explain why. It's a story about homelessness, and I'll give you the elevator pitch. I live in Los Angeles, and the book is about there's a monster in Skid Row, and it's killing homeless people, and nobody gives a fuck. And the reason why I think that's scary is because I could see it happening. It's like, it's not too absurd to me. I mean, sure, yeah, supernatural hairy monster isn't going to come up from the streets and eat homeless people, but is that even going to get in the news? If like homeless people are getting killed in Skid Row, do people care? I think when I started researching for this novel, one of the things that I realized is and there's a homeless issue here in San Francisco too.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that I realized when I started researching for the novel was that everybody says we need to do something about the homeless. But what that really means is I don't want to see them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see them when I'm walking to work on my daily commute. I don't want to see them sitting in front of the storefront. Or maybe you have a little bit more empathy, like, oh, we should house them. What does that mean? You want to put them in a portable? These people that haven't lived within the system, you want to just put them in a portable and tell them to get a job as a dishwasher? There's no real easy answer to what we could possibly do to help these people. It's a major problem, and I think all I just want to do is shed light on those facts, that maybe we as a society that are privileged enough to not have to live homeless, that not have mental health issues that keep us on the streets, or drug addictions, or traumas, or that maybe we should start thinking differently about how we can help these people. One of the things about the book that kind of changed my outlook was I used to always be one of those people that's like, oh, we should give them food. Like, I'll go to McDonald's or something and buy them food and coffee, but I'm not going to give them money because they're going to spend it on drugs and they don't need that. And Skid Row is the biggest open-air mental health institution in the world.
Yes.
And a lot of these people are suffering. They're suffering from uncounted mental health issues, schizophrenia, for example, right? Well, and yeah, you could say there's social services out there that can provide them medication, but jumping through these hoops for these people can be a major challenge. And not only that, a lot of them don't trust the system because they've been burned by it before. So now I'm like, if a $5 crack rock can do the same thing for your schizophrenia than a $300 bottle of clozapine, like, who am I to say don't self-medicate? And we all self-medicate, right? Most of us, I mean, we drink, we smoke, some of us abuse prescription medications. And what? Why are we better than them? Why do we get it? Because we have a shitty apartment or a nice house that we can go back to? So yeah, like I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with my new book series is sort of take the piss out of myself too, like my old feelings. I want to write stories that sort of changed my opinions as I research, and I hope that it resonates with an audience. And if it doesn't, well, fuck it. At least I wrote the book.
What type of protagonist most interests you?
Flawed ones, because that's what we really are, right? I feel like I can't stand the black and white, good versus evil stuff. And when I say flawed protagonist, I'm not talking about like Patrick Bateman over here running around chainsawing prostitutes. I'm talking about just normal people that have to deal with shame, that have to deal with things that they're embarrassed about, that they're ashamed of. You fucked up in your life. All of you. I did too. We've all made mistakes. We've all hurt somebody that we cared about. We've all said something that we regret. I want to show that side of my protagonists. My protagonist in Beast Beneath the Streets has that feeling about drugs and imposes those feelings towards friends and doesn't want them to do drugs. But he fails to see that for a lot of them, this is the best way for them to handle their shit, handle their trauma, handle their mental health issues.
So I know there's a couple movies that come to mind quickly that are really strong around that kind of thing, talking about flawed characters. There's a movie called Saint Maud. I don't know if you've seen that. With
No.
the woman who is working in a hospital. And she starts to believe that Jesus is talking to her, that she's become a chosen one. And there's a very strong feeling that she may be hurting other patients. It's really, really disturbing because she believes she's been hurt before. She's gone through all of this trauma, and this almost feels like a revelation. I think it's really interesting how horror works in multiple ways. There's the macro, which is it's commenting on the culture, right? The external. And then there's the internal. And the internal is where it's personally speaking to us. And it can happen in any kind of allegory or metaphor. And what I think happened over the pandemic, like we talked about this before, the pandemic, everybody who hears that you're a horror guy, they come up and go, you must have loved zombie movies during the pandemic. Like, fuck no. I hated zombie movies. Are you out of your mind? I don't want to talk about the bug again, ever. I want to talk about how it fucked you up. How did it change your life? How did it alter how you do things now? And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, we had a lot of flawed characters who believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were right in a lot of horror films that happened around that time. And I think that we are working through something as artists about how perhaps what we thought was true is not necessarily true, that we have fucked up. I think after certain elections, people felt that way. I like to say that, I would not want to watch a movie that was about the insurrection, right? But vampires or werewolves taking over the Capitol, I could watch that. I could sit down and take that distance.
I mean, the protagonists that really resonate with me are the ones that look themselves in the mirror and have to ask themselves, am I a good person? And I think you're absolutely not a good person if you've never asked yourself that.
Right.
Because it means you're incapable of self-reflection. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person if you have. because it takes work. It takes work to make amends for your past mistakes. And you might not ever get those people to forgive you that you have hurt, or you might not ever truly forgive yourself.
Yeah. There are some really intriguing movies that are coming out about mistakes, where the metaphor of the monster is kind of the healing process. And of course, I know that one of the terms that gets bandied around a lot is elevated horror. And of course, I think that can be done poorly and done rather well as well. But there are movies about cowardice, like The Ritual. That was a Netflix film a couple years ago. It was about a guy who...
I like The Ritual a lot.
Yeah. There's also another one called Relic, which is 3 generations of women, and the grandmother is dying. And it becomes a supernatural thing about grief. The Babadook was fantastic. I mean, there's a movie where...
The guilt of not really liking your kid.
Yeah, and having it, and knowing that is part of the deal because of a tragedy that happened. You lose the love of your life, and this child comes into the world. The expectations are gone. I love the idea of the Babadook, which is that it's the thought that shouldn't be, that's in you, and you have to live with it. And that's one of the things that I think was interesting about the Babadook, is that it's the only movie that I can remember in recent memory where it didn't go the 2 ways that movies usually go. You either kill the monster kills you. Or you burn the bones, or you bury whatever and it goes away. This was all about, hey, this is real. You have to live with it. And anybody that didn't like it was usually guys, and they usually said, man, I get that the kid was an asshole, but we didn't need that much crying from the kid. I'm like, that's the point. The point is she can never leave.
Yeah, you want to go through what you want the audience to go through what she's going through, at least to be able to empathize a little bit.
Yeah. So I always say that we do like elevated horror. We hate terrible, obvious elevated horror. Horror is always speaking to us in some fashion, even unconsciously. I like the director Toby Hooper, when they were talking to him about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what they always did. He goes, well, sometimes you make a movie and it takes 20 years for you to know what the hell it's about. And he's being funny, but he's also being very, very honest, which is, as an artist, a lot of times you create something and you don't necessarily know. Zeitgeists don't show themselves to you. They're not planned. It's like, in 6 months, we're going to have a zeitgeist, everybody, come on over. That it happens when somebody just trips over the thing that's obvious. Yeah. And everybody recognizes it. So how do you feel about movies that are constantly trying to get some message about what's happening right now under its metaphors?
Well, like you were saying, it should be something that feels natural. At the same time, I understand why somebody says there needs to be a story about this, but typically the movies that are trying too hard are kind of doing the same thing other movies did or already and better. So I would say find a new slant. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's always that way. And that's how trends tend to get judged. I remember in the 70s, you had this spate of incredible films. There are a lot of people who will tell you that the early 70s were the greatest time in Hollywood, where you had these young guys who just came in and broke all the rules. So you had movies that were downers. They had downer endings. But everybody thought that they could do them. So you'd be in the movie theater and you'd watch a movie like Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, this devil-may-care racing movie. And at the very end of the movie, they go, well, no one's going to get in our way. And they get hit by a fucking train and die. And the movie ends. And so it's those kind of things where people who don't necessarily know how to deal with the metaphor, they don't really know how to deal with the information, those unfortunately get to be the people who are remembered for these things, because they're the tail end of a really weird trend that's happening. A trend that I see now that I think you've kind of written a little bit of would be the bizarro horror, which I think is really intriguing. Can you describe a little bit of what you think bizarro is?
Oh man, how do you describe bizarro?
It's like cult film in a book.
I feel like people could write books on that. Just, this is what bizarro is. To me, bizarro is a close, not necessarily horror, but a close cousin too, or somewhere between. Maybe it even bridges the gap between horror and comedy through its absurdity.
I think some things are bizarro horror and some things are bizarro suspense and some are bizarro
Right.
romances.
Yeah, but they're always kind of fun. Like you
Oh,
got to
they're
laugh
always-
at it because
yeah.
it's so ridiculous. Just the rules don't necessarily work the way we expect them to, and the author isn't really going to bother to define them. I see Bizarro as a really interesting genre that I do think is going to come on. It could potentially come on the rise, and it could be something that we see more in mainstream media. We talked a little bit about elevated horror, and there might be a fatigue on the horizon. I mean, I think elevated horror is just a branding
Yeah.
for horror, but there could be some sort of a fatigue on the horizon that people don't want to see or don't want to watch or read a whole lot of stories about how, man, racism sucks and misogyny sucks, and like, yeah, we all know that, right? And if these films, like you say, are going to constantly start copying that and coming out with the same thing over and over and over again, people are going to start to look somewhere else. They're going to start to look for escapism. And I could totally see Bizarro or Bizarro horror finding a foothold somewhere in mainstream pop culture, either television, film, and there will be copycats if it takes.
Yeah. So you have a story called Head in the Fridge, right? That would be your closest foray with Bizarro?
Yeah, I would say you could say Head in the Fridge, or that would probably be, that'd probably be my closest Bizarro film.
Sorry to bring up all the things
story.
that have heads in them.
Yeah.
Decomposing head. But can you explain
Head's
a little
a funny
bit?
word. The story's not that funny, but people think it is because I just spammed head. I just said head a bunch.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think is really cool about it. And what I think is really cool about Bizarro is that it seems to be so much about absurdism and defying definition and refusing at times to go down the realm of sensibility. But at the center of it is this horrific idea.
Characters will react in a way that you might not expect them to react. Head in the fridge, a guy finds a head in his girlfriend's fridge, and
After sex.
yes,
He's going for a munch.
Right, he isn't wearing pants. He's wearing a t-shirt but not pants, because that's how I do it. And is that too much info?
It's early.
And no, they don't want to see all this. You gotta cover up a little bit for the second date, you know. And then the girlfriend's like, "Oh yeah, I eat heads," and right there, I wouldn't call that Bizarro. Where it gets to Bizarro is when the head starts screaming in the fridge, and their reaction is to have a conversation with it. The Bizarro bucks traditional rules of society. It can buck physics and anatomy and physiology, and everybody just sort of goes along with it.
I think that's one of the interesting things for me about it is that if we really look at what comedy is about for a personal level, I mean, there's the idea of what comedy is as an art form, that it's there to poke holes in the higher ups and all of that. But I think a lot of us have a sense of humor to deflect the pain. Whatever it is that we have in our lives, we deflect pain with it. And I think that the horror and humor in Bizarro, there's something in the center of these stories that is really horrific. That in Bizarro actually goes, "Fie, there's no way we're going to get depressed about this. We're going to go down this path."
Yeah.
And I think that there's something about where we've been as a culture for like a while now, between the invisible killers in the air that we're breathing, to insane people in office, to all sorts of crazy stuff that's been going on, fears over who's using toilets. All of this madness and the definitions that we've been told are supposed to be our reality. I think that is why Bizarro is so tantalizing.
I wrote a Bizarro story called Growths just this year. So I can't believe I forgot all about it. It's about giant vaginas that grow out of the ground.
Out of the
What? All right.
There you go. We got one down already.
Who doesn't love a vagina?
That's right.
Yeah, it's about giant vaginas that go out of the ground and what happens when you walk through it. The mystery of what happens when you enter it.
I think
I don't know. There's probably something in there that a shrink could like just totally unwrap about me. But
sometimes a vagina coming out of the ground is just a vagina coming out of the ground.
that's what I would say. Yeah.
And so it cracks me up when I have people who talk to me about, because I'll talk about how I see some social stuff in just about every horror movie if you look close enough. And they'll go, sometimes it's just a movie. And I said, oh yeah, like they'll say, oh, you're like Freud. Sometimes a banana is just a banana. I said, no, a banana is sometimes just a banana. Bananas fucking exist. Giant pod things coming from space and taking over people's souls don't exist. That tells me perhaps it might be an imaginary metaphor standing in for something. So I guess we want to make sure we talk about your new book, Midnight Hour.
It's a book series, so I can't legally market it like this, but I'm basically calling it Goosebumps for grown-ups. But it's short horror novels. The idea is just something you can pick up. They're not. It doesn't follow one particular character. Each story is different and unique. They are shared universe, and I am going to get to have fun, really taking the piss out of a lot of different things that piss me off, or scare me, or disgust me. But I want to do it in a way where I can have fun with it. There's one of the ones that I've been playing with lately is I'm not sure when if it's not gonna be the first release, but it's called Karen. And you can guess what that's about. Well, if you look at all the subtext, it's always about vaginas. But there's more to it. Sort of.
So talking about other things that are kind of undercurrents that are happening in horror, creepypastas.
Yeah.
You were involved with creepypasta for a bit. Can you discuss that a little bit? Because that's kind of an interesting grassroots kind of look at the horror story.
Nice segue there.
Yeah, I'm big on it. I swing for the fences. Get off the vagina.
I do love creepypasta. Buddy, probably no Slender Man in the room, right? But I think one of the cool things about creepypastas as internet urban legends is that it's sort of crowdsourced horror. These characters are created not by one person, but by many. There's interesting lore. I wrote a creepypasta comic book, and it was... we had a lot of fun with it. It sold like hotcakes, so I had a lot of fun with the money that came from it. And it was a blast. But creepypasta is cool because it doesn't just work in the prose medium. It's not just scary stories that you read. It's constantly evolving, and it evolves with technology. So there's creepypasta, TikTok, unfiction, and we were talking a little bit earlier about LOAB, the first ever AI-generated creepypasta demon that's appearing now in AI art like Midjourney and stuff like that.
Describe it for people who might not know.
Well, it's if you use AI art generators, the very first time this was found, somebody typed in the opposite of Marlon Brando, and this woman's face came up, and they're like, "That's weird. Who is this woman?" And they started doing like negative keyword searches, and this woman's face kept popping up again and again and again. And if you look it up, LOAB. LOAB AI art, just search Google Images at this point. You'll find millions and millions of this strange, like this, it's just this peculiar because it's this woman. And nobody knows who it is. It's just an AI generated picture of a woman, and there's all these fun theories, and now you're getting stories about it and whatnot. But yeah, I kind of cut my horror teeth writing creepypastas and stuff like that. So I'm like, I always listen. I always look for the new cool thing. Backrooms are interesting. Backrooms is like you just like step off a stair wrong and then blip into some office building, empty office building that has endless corridors, endless hallways, and there's all kinds of fun, awesome lore people have done with like YouTube and written in prose. I'm sure somebody's working on a Backrooms book if they haven't already. But that's the fun thing. Is you have all these different content creators working together to create these awesome characters, these awesome stories, these awesome urban legends, and it's just a weird, wonderful way that the internet brings people together.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it's like this collective anxiety that people have.
You don't see that in other forms of horror, right? Like in film or in literature, we have to be protective of our intellectual property. But if you're working with some public domain internet character, you can do all kinds of fun things, and the lore expands, and the lore influences real life things because people have heard of the Slender Man stabbings.
Yes. Yeah. How about video games? Do you think that there's a huge slew of really good horror video games that are out there? And
oh, yeah.
There are some that have legend because they were never made.
Right, yeah.
And so do you think that after having several generations of people creating stories themselves through video games, do you think that is going to change how narrative is being done?
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about that one too. On the way into the con hall, I was telling you about Doki Literature Club, which is if you haven't played it, it's very strange. It's a cute little anime dating simulator for like the first 4 hours. You're like an anime teenage boy joining a literature club to flirt with cute girls, and then one of them hangs themselves like out of the blue 4 hours into the game, and then it just goes to hell. And I really recommend people check it out because when I first saw it, I was like, my jaw hit the floor, and it got so fucking meta. It really weirded me out.
That's awesome. So what's your favorite horror story?
Which is weird because it's written by a science fiction writer, Philip K. Dick, the second variety. I think Philip K. Dick, I think he probably understood how to project paranoia better than anybody. Mm-hmm. Probably because he was really, really paranoid in a way that I couldn't possibly hope to achieve without like lots and lots of drugs. But shout out to the Bay Area legend, Philip K. Dick, and all of his wonderful, creepy science fiction stories. But second variety is, to me, it's especially now in today's, with Russia and NATO constantly talking about, we can nuke each other. I'm like, oh shit, and drone warfare being more of a thing now. It's about fucking drones, guys. And it feels like this could literally happen in a few years. Yeah. It's frightening. Even like the rich people like live on the moon. I could totally see Elon putting up all the elites on a rocket and zipping off to Mars or something.
Well, believe it or not, we are pretty much out of time, folks. I do want to thank you all for being here. So, Vincent, before we do run out of time, tell the folks so they can find your books, follow your exploits, your Tinder profile, anything like that.
You can find me anywhere at Vincent Vina Cava. I am like on every social media. I think I just downloaded Hive Social. So you can. I don't know what that's called. It's not a tweet. You don't tweet on Hive. It's like a buzz.
Is that what it is? I was about to say an itch.
It's a
one Hive here.
It's a heave. But whatever your preferred social media platform is, or if you have a few, Yes, I'm on TikTok. You can watch me do little dances and stuff. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and Snapchat, and all the good stuff.
Well, fantastic.
And Amazon, where you can buy my books and give me your money.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for being here. If you're looking for a little bit of me, I have a podcast called Hellbent for Horror. It's what we've been doing here the whole time. I have a book called Screaming for Pleasure, How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy. And I'm here all weekend at A200, table A200. Be happy to see you there. And once again, thank you for being here, and stay hellbent, everybody. And thanks for listening to the show. Hellbent for Horror was written and broadcast by me, S.A. Bradley, and produced by me and Lisa Gorski. You can find more on our website, hellbentforhorror.com, and I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/hellbentforhorror, and my Twitter handle is hellbenthorror. Please hit that subscribe button to get H4H hot off the press. And if you can do a review on iTunes or whatever app you listen to us on, that really helps people get to find us. And now for some Hellbent for Horror news. The podcast is available on some more outlets now, so you can listen to H4H on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn Radio, as well as the regular iTunes, Android, and Amazon apps. And let there be swag. H4H t-shirts are now on sale. We have a store on tpublic.com with a bunch of Hellbent for Horror designs, and you can have your choice of t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, something horrible beautiful for you or that someone special. The link to the merchandise store is on our website, hellbentforhorror.com. And until we meet again, stay hellbent.